At the beginning of the 20th century, the place that would become Hollywood was not yet a symbol of glamour, power, or wealth. It was instead a quiet agricultural community on the outskirts of LA. Lemon groves stretched across dusty hills, small houses dotted the land. The climate was warm, dry, and remarkably predictable. No one living there in 1900 could have imagined that this unremarkable patch of California would soon become the center of the global entertainment industry. And the transformation began almost by accident. Welcome to History Unpacked. If you enjoy the content, consider subscribing. We post every week and we welcome any feedback. In the early years of cinema, filmmaking was hardly centered in New York and New Jersey. The industry was small, experimental, and still searching for its identity. But there was a problem. The American film industry was dominated by the powerful Motion Pictures Patents Company, a cartel controlled largely by the inventor Thomas Edison. Edison held numerous patents related to motion picture technology. His company aggressively enforced those patents, often sending investigators and lawyers after independent filmmakers. For many small studios, working under the Edison Trust meant constant legal pressure. The solution was simple: move as far away as possible. California offered distance from Edison's legal reach. It also offered something filmmakers desperately needed: sunlight. Early film cameras required enormous amounts of natural light. Southern California's long, bright days made filming easier and cheaper. By the 1910s, independent filmmakers had begun migrating west. One of the earliest studios to establish itself in the area was Nestor Studios, which opened in Hollywood in 1911. Others quickly followed. Within a few years, Hollywood had become the heart of the American film industry. During the 1920s and the 1930s, Hollywood evolved into something far larger than a collection of studios. It became a tightly controlled industrial system. Major companies such as the Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer, Warner Brothers, Paramount Pictures, and 20th Century Fox came to dominate the industry. Those studios did not merely produce films, they controlled nearly every stage of the process. Actors were placed under long-term contracts. Directors worked exclusively for studios. Even cinemas were owned by the same companies producing the films. Hollywood had, effectively, built a factory system for storytelling. Stars were carefully manufactured. Publicists controlled their images. Personal scandals were hidden. Romantic relationships were sometimes arranged for publicity. To audiences around the world, Hollywood appeared as a dream factory, glamorous, elegant, and impossibly sophisticated. Behind the scenes, however, the reality was often very different. The illusion of moral purity began to crack in the early 1920s. In 1921, one of Hollywood's biggest stars became the center of a scandal that shocked the entire country. The actor Roscoe "Fatty" Arbuckle was accused of sexually assaulting and killing a young actress named Virginia Rapp during a party in San Francisco. The press exploded with sensational coverage. Newspapers portrayed Arbuckle as the symbol of Hollywood's moral corruption, an overweight comedian indulging in wild parties, alcohol, and sexual excess. The truth, however, was far more complicated. Arbuckle was tried 3 times. 2 trials ended with hung juries. The 3rd trial resulted in a complete acquittal. The jury even issued a rare formal apology, declaring that no evidence connected him to the crime. But the damage had already been done. His career was effectively destroyed. For the American public, the scandal seemed to confirm suspicions that Hollywood was a place of decadence and moral decay. And Arbuckle's case would not be the last. Another scandal soon followed. In 1922, the famous director William Desmond Taylor was found shot dead in his LA home. The case was sensational. Taylor was well known within the industry. His murder raised immediate questions about Hollywood's secret lives. Several prominent figures became suspects, including actresses who had worked with him. Rumors spread about drugs, secret relationships, and hidden scandals. Despite an enormous investigation, the case was never solved. The unsolved murder only deepened the growing sense that Hollywood concealed darker realities behind its glamorous facade. By the early 1930s, public concern about Hollywood's moral influence had reached a boiling point. Religious organizations and political leaders began calling for government censorship of films. The studios feared federal intervention. Their response was to create their own system of control. In 1930, Hollywood adopted the Motion Picture Production Code, often called the Hays Code after Will H. Hays, the man responsible for enforcing it. The code imposed strict moral rules on films. Crime could not appear attractive. Sexual content was heavily restricted. Even married couples were often shown sleeping in separate beds. The code remained in force for more than 3 decades. For many years, it successfully maintained the illusion that Hollywood represented wholesome American values. But the industry was changing, and the scandals would return. The studio system reached its peak during the 1930s and 1940s. During this period, Hollywood produced some of the most famous films ever made. Stars such as Clark Gable, Bette Davis, and Humphrey Bogart became global icons. Hollywood films dominated cinemas around the world. But the system that created this success was also extremely rigid. Actors had little freedom. Studios controlled their roles, public appearances, and even aspects of their private lives. Many performers eventually rebelled. One of the most important turning points came in 1948, when the United States vs. Paramount Pictures Inc. forced major studios to sell their theater chains. The decision effectively dismantled the studio monopoly. The old Hollywood system began to collapse. If the 1920s scandals exposed Hollywood's moral controversies, the late 1940s introduced a very different crisis: political suspicion. During the early Cold War, fears of communist influence spread across American society. Hollywood became one of the primary targets. In 1947, the House Un-American Activities Committee began investigating alleged communist infiltration within the film industry. Screenwriters, directors, and actors were called to testify. Those who refused to cooperate were blacklisted, effectively banned from working in Hollywood. Among the most famous victims were the group known as the Hollywood 10, who were imprisoned for refusing to answer questions. Careers were destroyed, friendships collapsed under suspicion. For more than a decade, political fear reshaped the film industry. By the end of the 1960s, the old Hollywood order was rapidly disappearing. The production code was weakening. Television had begun competing with cinema. Audiences were changing, and younger viewers wanted films that felt more realistic and more daring. In 1968, the production code was replaced by the modern film rating system that we use today, administered by the Motion Picture Association. Hollywood entered a new era. Directors gained greater creative freedom. Films could explore violence, sexuality, and controversial themes in ways that had once been forbidden. This period produced a new generation of filmmakers who reshaped the industry. During the 1970s, directors such as Martin Scorsese, Francis Ford Coppola, and Steven Spielberg brought new energy to Hollywood. Their films were ambitious, stylistically bold, and often darker than the movies of earlier decades. But the industry also became increasingly driven by large commercial successes. Blockbuster films, movies designed to attract massive global audiences, began to dominate. The release of Jaws and Star Wars demonstrated the enormous profits that could come from global hits. Hollywood was becoming not just a cultural institution, but a vast international business. Despite its public glamour, Hollywood continued to struggle with scandals behind the scenes. One of the most significant emerged in 2017. The powerful producer Harvey Weinstein, co-founder of the Weinstein Company, was accused by dozens of women of sexual harassment and assault. Investigations revealed that abusive behavior had allegedly been tolerated within parts of the industry for years. The scandal triggered a global movement known as the Me Too movement, encouraging victims across many industries to speak publicly about harassment and abuse. Weinstein was later convicted in court. This scandal forced Hollywood to confront systematic issues that had long remained hidden. Today, Hollywood remains the most influential center of global filmmaking. Major studios are now part of vast media corporations such as the Walt Disney Company and Warner Brothers Discovery. Streaming services like Netflix have transformed how films and television are produced and distributed. The industry is now global in scale. Movies are financed internationally, filmed across multiple continents, and marketed to audiences around the world. Yet the contradictions that have always defined Hollywood remain. It is a place of immense creativity and extraordinary wealth, but it's also an industry shaped by power, image management, and periodic scandal.